Hey, welcome back to Clever Cat class. Are you ready to learn something all new and be a very clever cat? Me too. First up, there's a lot of birds in the world. In fact, there's over 9,500 species of birds, and scientists, they've grouped them into 30 different categories. What that means is birds are the most widespread of all the creatures around the world, including humans. Curiously, though, almost two-thirds of all the bird species are found in the tropical rainforests. Even more curious, the record for the longest feathers ever seen on a bird were actually on a chicken. A chicken in Japan. Its feathers measured 34.7 feet long. And you kind of wonder how birds can fly, right? Well, it turns out to make them lightweight so that they can fly, they don't actually have bladders to stir urine like you do. Instead of having liquid urine, they actually produce a white pasty substance that's both urine and feces. Except the ostrich. The ostrich is a special bird. It doesn't actually have a bladder like your bladder, but it does have a complete separation of feces and urine. Okay, let's move on to something not poo related. The Australian pelican, it actually has the longest bill of any bird in the world, measuring nearly 2 feet in length. Speaking of beaks, the sword-billed hummingbird also deserves a mention. With its 3.9-inch beak, it's the only bird with a beak that's longer than its whole body. Something curious about owls, they can't move their eyes at all. Instead, they move their whole heads completely around to see behind them. Owls are also known as silent flyers because they have soft fringes on their wings that make their flight, well, essentially silent. And then there's the kiwi. The kiwi is actually the only bird with nostrils on the end of its beak. This helps it sniff for food like worms and insects on the ground, and it often snorts to clear its nostrils. And then we have the woodpecker. The woodpecker doesn't sing. Instead, it drums its beak against a tree, and believe it or not, other woodpeckers can identify which bird it is just by the sound of its drumming. That's not the only amazing thing about the woodpecker, though. A green woodpecker, it can eat as many as 2,000 ants every single day, and I kind of want one of them in my yard. And at least we can hear the woodpecker. Believe it or not, there are birds out there like starlings that sing notes too high for a human being's ears to hear. And the African gray parrot's also an award winner. Believe it or not, it's considered the most talkative bird in the world, and one parrot was said to have over 800 words that it could say, though most parrots only have about 50. And we can't leave out the bird with the most feathers. That would be the whistling swan, with up to 25,000 feathers on one whistling swan body. On the other end of the spectrum are the birds with the fewest feathers. That honor goes to the hummingbirds, who are so small they often have fewer than 1,000 feathers. Hummingbirds deserve another mention because they actually have the smallest egg in the world. The egg is just supposed to be about 1/2 to 1/4 of an inch, and it can weigh a mere 0.2 of an ounce. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the ostrich, who lays the biggest egg in the world, measuring in at 7 inches by 5 inches and weighing a whopping 3 pounds. And here we have to mention the kiwi again, because the kiwi, it actually has the biggest egg for the size of the mother of any bird, with the eggs measuring about 1/3 of the weight of the mother bird. And as you might expect, the larger the bird, the longer it takes for a chick to hatch. The emu, it takes about 60 days to hatch, and small songbirds, they only take about 14 days. Of course, the Mele fowl is pretty gross. It actually makes a huge compost pile for its eggs, and then it doesn't sit on them. The eggs are incubated by the heat given off by that rotting vegetation. Okay, enough about eggs. Let's move on to some other really cool birds, like the marsh warbler, who can mimic more than 80 different bird sounds, really causing some confusion when it sets out to play. Or the Andean condor, who wins the prize as the heaviest bird of prey, weighing in at up to 27 pounds. And then there's the chicken, who's actually the closest living relative of the Tyrannosaurus rex. Speaking of chickens, some people will tell you chickens are stupid, but guess what? That's not true. Chickens have over 200 distinct noises that they make for communicating with other chickens. Arctic terns have the longest annual migration of any bird, flying a massive 25,000 miles from the Arctic to the Antarctic and then back again each and every year. And creepily enough, most birds have 3 fingers on each wing. The first one, the thumb, supports the small part of the wing. The second and third fingers, they support the main flight feathers. Don't try to catch a swift to look, though, because swifts, they spend most of their lives in the air. They even sleep in the air by gliding on air currents with their wings outstretched. And you know that wishbone you like to break every Thanksgiving? Believe it or not, the wishbone is a bird's collarbone. And the stronger the flyer, the wider the angle of their wishbone. And groups of birds have some really bizarre names. A group of crows is called a murder or congress. A group of owls, a parliament, a wisdom or a study. And a group of flamingos, they're called a flamboyance. And we can't leave vultures out. Vultures actually have stomach acid so corrosive that they can actually digest carcasses infected with anthrax and not get sick. Despite their tiny size, hummingbirds might just win the prize for the biggest eater. See, hummingbirds eat about every 10 minutes, slurping down twice their body weight in nectar every single day. And do you know why wild flamingos are pink? It's because of the food that they consume. And in zoos, they actually have to transport in special foods in order to make their flamingos pink too. And while on the subject of flamingos, you know that bend about halfway down the flamingo's leg? It's an ankle, not a knee. The knee's hidden up underneath the feathers and you can't see it. Hey, and back to turkeys. Do you know that the call of the turkey is called a gobbling? The flesh that dangles underneath the beak is known as a wattle, and when they get together, the whole group is called a rafter. Even more curious, turkey poo has been used as a fuel in power plants since 2007, and 55 megawatts can produce for 50,000 tons of turkey waste. Okay, there I am on poo again. How about something more cheerful? In the United States, there are over 40 million pet birds, and on each of those birds, its feathers actually weigh more than its skeleton. And if you happen to have a pet bird nearby, go check out its beak. Believe it or not, the type of diet a bird can eat is directly related to the shape of its beak. Thank you so much for learning with me today. We're really getting quite clever, aren't we? Now it's time for you to check your schedule, and I will see you in your next class.